And so, if we raise a generation of people that can't do diligent observation of biology, we're just headed for trouble.
Thank you. I'm glad you're all here. Sometime back, years and years ago, that murky period when it goes beyond last Tuesday, humankind knew another species that was kind of like us. It wasn't Neanderthal, it wasn't some other group like that. It was just something kind of like us and kind of not like us. And we knew it, and we shared with it, and we mated with it, and we lived with it. And now, we don't even know what it was. We don't even know how we related to it. Now, a lot of you are thinking, yeah, I had a first marriage, but this is on a bigger scale. And you know what it tells us? My wife, by the way, loves that joke. She always says, your next wife is going to find that hilarious. The point is, evolution is messy. There are all sorts of stops and starts and things that get going and things that fall away, and sometimes we know why, and sometimes we don't. But through the process, we get salmon and bandicoots and polar bears and horses and the New York Jets, although we're not sure why that's working out the way it is. Nonetheless, Bill Nye thinks that the fundamental understanding of this process and what it means to us and our ability to sort through the things in our lives, our medicine, our health, our procreation, our race relations, our human relations, everything needs this underpinning of understanding of evolution. And if we don't understand it, that there is a very serious flaw at work in our ability to move forward as a nation and as a people. And he's very concerned about the people who really do not want this taught as the truth of our world. His book is undeniable, Evolution and the Science of Creation. It's really interesting. Bill Nye is a mechanical engineer from Cornell University. He's a science educator. He is the CEO of the Planetary Society. He has won more Emmy Awards than you could carry out of this room. And he, day in and day out, spreads the word of the importance of moving forward with an understanding of evolution for whatever we want to accomplish, in our name or in the name of any God you may believe in. Please welcome the wonderful Bill Nye.
Wow, thank you. Glowing. Thank you. Woo! Wow. Thank you, Tom.
You're welcome. Bill, let me ask you one question before I ask anything else. Have you had a single week in the past 12, 15 years that somebody hasn't yelled out, hey, Bill Nye, Science Guy?
No.
No. No. Tell me why you wrote this book. Why did this book matter to you?
Well, our story begins with another anecdote. My editor on this was a guy named Corey Powell. Some of you who are into science writing might know him. Anyway, I had dinner with him, see if he wanted to help me with this thing. And he said, why do you want to write this book? I said, because I want to change the world. And that's when he agreed to do it. I want to change the world. I want everybody to know the fundamental idea in all of life science so that we can move forward together and just be better educated and better to each other.
Bill and I first met in person. I think we had met through satellite or on TV a couple of times.
Yeah.
We first met in person at this thing called the Creation Museum in Kentucky. And there was a debate there. I assume probably a lot of you watched this, or maybe saw this. It was watched by millions of people on both sides of the spectrum and a lot of the areas in between. Why do you think so many people were interested in this debate?
All I can figure is there are a lot of people who are still very troubled by their religious beliefs and the idea that that we are not especially special as a species. And it is troubling. I can understand that. But people are fascinated with it. And if you're in science education, it's a tremendous problem. We have these enormous states in the United States, Texas, Tennessee, Kentucky, Oklahoma, where people fight the idea of evolution in textbooks and curricula. And this wouldn't matter, except science is the key to our future if you're in the U.S., in my opinion. What keeps the U.S. in the game economically is our ability to innovate, to do new cool things. We don't manufacture stuff the way we did when I was a kid, and certainly not the way we did when by the way, it's Pearl Harbor Day, which I always take a second with. My dad was captured, was a prisoner of war in World War II. If you get a chance to be a prisoner of war, I would not do that. I would avoid that. But they were bombed they were on Wake Island. I'm not digressing. They were on Wake Island. But it was the 8th of December because Wake Island's across the international date line. And anyway, to have a society that's increasingly dependent on technology. We all have smartphones. We all rely on the trains showing up when they're supposed to. These lights are all electric. Some of them are light-emitting diodes. Some of them are old style. In order to have those innovations, you have to have a scientifically literate society. So you don't want people that can maybe do physics and chemistry, can maybe do what I call planetary science, which is astronomy, and which would include geology. But you got to have people who are literate in life science if you want to be a doctor. And so if we're raising a generation of people that doesn't understand critical thinking and the process of science, we're headed for trouble.
One of the things that you point out in this book that I find really interesting is that you find...
You read it?
Yes, of course I read it, Bill.
Well, a lot of times people don't have time for those times.
He inscribed it in the front, to the first, Bill Nye. Thank you. One of the things you point out in here is that many of the people who have very strong issues with evolution being taught as fact, at the same time benefit immensely from knowledge that has come through evolution.
This is it. Oh, man. You know, everybody who gets a vaccination, and by the way, you all got a few when you were kids, babies. Everybody who gets vaccinations relies on this understanding. Everybody who's had a broken bone set or whatever relies on an understanding of medical science. And what underpins it all is this fundamental idea, which is evolution. Now, it's just striking to me that the guys who discovered this, Charles Darwin and Russell Wallace, if you haven't heard of Russell Wallace or maybe heard of him, he was quite a bit younger than Darwin, and Darwin wrote this book that it still is so good, Origin of Species. Anyway, these guys did that without any understanding of DNA. It's amazing that they figured it out just by dint of diligent observation. And so, if we raise a generation of people that can't do diligent observation of biology, we're just headed for trouble.
One of the things that you made some effort to point out at the debate in Kentucky, and you do in your book as well, is that you are not, however, saying in this book that there is some definitive answer as to the question of a deity's existence, just like Darwin said, I don't know.
I don't know, yeah. You can argue, I think I can argue successfully that you can't know whether or not there is a deity running, or a group of deities, which has been postulated many times. You can't know that. But that aside, the Pope's on board now. The process of evolution is demonstrable and wonderful.
One of the things that you talk about in here a great deal also is this question of mucking about with evolution. You talk about genetically modified products. You talk about genetically modified human beings, and you seem to walk a bit of a line on this. You, in one breath, say, I can see the bad of it, but maybe there's some good to it too. And I'm going to suspect that some people here have feelings about genetically modified things.
Well, the thing is, though, keep in mind, my opinion is correct. I mean, that's clear to me. I don't know what the deal is. So when it comes to human cloning, see, if you have an understanding of evolution, then we'll get into genetically modified foods, if I can consider this a two-part question.
Sure.
When it comes to human cloning, you don't want to clone a human. for evolutionary reasons. The best idea, one of the old questions.
Doesn't that depend on the human? Because there are some.
Well, there's some I would definitely like to restrict. Yeah. Mars one way? I've got some people.
Oh, no, don't start on that.
So from an evolutionary standpoint, the best idea anybody has as to why anybody has sex, whether you're a human or even my old boss, or sea jelly or poison ivy or barnacle or whoever you are, the reason you have sex apparently is to stay ahead of your biggest enemy. And your biggest enemy is not lions and tigers and bears, which of course we all know to be very troublesome, but it's germs and parasites. So, why don't we just split ourselves in half like any self-respecting bacterium and just, bud off another person and just move on? What? But apparently it's to get this new combination of genes that stays just ahead of germs and parasites. So if you clone yourself, you're going to fall one step behind. You will not be keeping up with everybody else in society. That's right there. Then when it comes to genetically modified food, the answer is clearly it depends. There have been successes and I dodged a bullet. And when it comes to gene splicing or putting genes from one species into another. So one of the argument, this has been the most controversial part of my book, I would say, on social media. I will argue that the potential for genetically modified organisms seems huge, but it is addressing a problem that we may not really have. We don't really have a problem of food production. We, by any reasonable reckoning, have more food than we can use. In the West, we waste a lot of food, and our problem is in distribution. So that aside, though, you can know what you do to any organism with extraordinary precision. And by any organism, we're talking about soybeans and corn and all these exciting things. You can know what those are going to do precisely. But what you can't be absolutely sure of is what you're going to do to the ecosystem. And the classic example of this, these crazy butterflies, these monarch butterflies that eat milkweed. It's delicious. I guess, if you're a monarch butterfly. And I don't know if you know the story, if you ever get a chance to see them, it's just crazy. They fly from Canada to Mexico every year. Butter-freaking flies. Not albatrosses, not, huge birds of prey with enormous wingspans and, metal detectors in their brains. And I've watched monarch butterflies because I worked in California for a long time. They can fly upwind. They get right on the deck, right down near the ground, and they can fly into the wind. It's amazing. We created a type of corn and soybeans that can tolerate this really powerful weed killer. Roundup's the famous brand. And are accidentally killing all the milkweed. So you're accidentally cutting way into by some estimates, 80% of certain monarch populations. And so that's sort of a mistake that nobody intended. And it wouldn't have happened if people hadn't modified. So
these, in effect, in some ways what you're talking about is skips in the evolutionary process, things that happen too quickly for adaptation, very much like the great phases of extinction that have happened in the Earth's time. Yes. It's not that things might not have been able to modify, they simply couldn't do it that fast.
Fast enough, right. So the other thing that's happened with genetically modified organisms, and it could be either way, but there are people that argue you're on a treadmill, that by making this corn that's resistant to the corn borer, then the corn borers that survive that resistant strain multiply like crazy. And so then you have to make a new one to fight a new corn borer, and so on and so on. And so as long as the man is involved, and by that I mean the corporations that people are often very critical of, as long as the corporation keeps modifying, you're okay. But if you introduce these organisms, and by organisms, I'm talking corn, soybeans, some plants, into the ecosystem that wouldn't get there by more conventional means, you may end up with something that's very vulnerable to a new parasite. And it's just be careful is my That's my bottom line.
One of the things you're talking about here, when you talk about the inability of people to sometimes grasp evolution, really to me is
time.
It's time. It's this gigantic measure of time. And by the way, I want you to, when you get the book here, the one of the great things here is they actually took Bill's drawings.
I know.
And they didn't have. I don't know why they just took his like scribbled notes. Do a map like
Scribble,
this. Great, boom, it's in
I
there.
used to work on a drawing board.
Yeah,
I
well,
wrote neatly.
operative words they're used to.
No, I thought they were going to hire a real, person.
I know, it's fantastic. But explain this part. I loved your description of time, if you were to lay it out as a walk across America and where we fit into this. This is fantastic.
I love you, man. So, for those of you who don't know, out in the world, they use the metric system. So if you measure, so what I wanted in this graph, this graphic, what is the word? Artwork. I wanted it to go left to right.
Cave painting. Go ahead.
Left to right, because that's how time is normally depicted. That's how we write sentences. 90% of humans are right-handed, so we ended up with the right-handed system. And I wanted it to go visually up the page. So I chose a hypothetical walk from San Diego, California to Boston, Massachusetts. And that turns out to be 4,500 kilometers, very close, 4,500 kilometers. And the Earth is 4.5 billion years old. Wait a minute. So each meter is 1,000 years. Each meter. Okay, so you walk.
Here to here.
You walk from San Diego all the way through extraordinary Broken Arrow, Oklahoma, Little Rock, Arkansas. You're walking across Tennessee, Ohio. You don't see anybody till you kind of get to New York State. You might see some dinosaurs, ancient dinosaurs, and then all of human history is the width of this stage. It's really an extraordinary thing. And so this guy Hutton said he was a geologist in the 1700s, said it was like looking into an abyss so deep you couldn't see the bottom. And he apparently coined the phrase deep time, which I think is just a great phrase. And you try to think back, 4.5 billion years, you're joking me. It's literally beyond what most of us can imagine. And I will say, as you may know, just to drop a name, I took astronomy from Carl Sagan, and he had the cosmic calendar, which is 365 days. And so I just got to tell you, ever since I was in that class, I get it. The real action happens just a few minutes to midnight on New Year's Eve. But 365 is kind of not a round number. Do you know what I mean? So I really feel good about my 4,500 kilometers. I worked hard on that. So thank you. Gosh.
But that is one of those. That really is that comprehension thing. We sometimes have stories where we're trying to explain really big numbers, and people will say, "Oh, it's like all the ping pong balls that would fit in the Grand Canyon." And I'm like,
wow,
that doesn't help at all.
Wow.
That doesn't help at all. And that's the problem with this, isn't it? You're talking about such a gigantic period of time and so many tiny, tiny changes. It is hard for people to grasp.
So try this, everybody. From the instant you're born, start counting once a second. And I don't care, you're a baby, no sleeping, just you're counting. You get to your billionth second when you're 31 in a few months. That's your billionth second. Nobody getting to 4.5 billion seconds. And so it's a long time. Can I throw this in before?
Yeah, go ahead.
What happened? Sorry, I left the house. The Jets lost. The Vikings kicked a field goal. They ran a big play and they won 85 yards. Yeah. No, the Jets. Anyway, if you go to a typical football stadium, NFL stadium, it'll seat 70,000 people, something like that.
Ballpark.
Yeah, ballpark. So, if you live to be 82 years and 7 weeks, it depends on leap years. you get 30,000 days. So in this thought experiment, you're watching your life down on the field, and you have to sit in a different seat every day, and you're watching your life, right? So day to day, it looks about the same, right? But after a while, you start to notice differences. So let me tell you, in 82 in 7 weeks, that's a pretty good run, yeah? You don't get halfway around. It sucks. It sucks. And so that's why, to me, understanding evolution is important. To understand your place in time and how you fit into the natural scheme, I think it's just really important for people to know. And I still, as you may observe, have trouble getting my mind around it. It's amazing.
You raise an interesting idea in this book, which I've encountered in little dribs and drabs here and there that I find really, really interesting. Here's a question. If this is about all of us as organisms, and you represent all life on Earth, and we're all competing for things to stay alive and to be something, then what explains altruism? Why would I ever do anything for you that's not for me?
So as you may know, I just love the story of the bats, the happy little bats who fly around. And if one bat doesn't get enough to eat, apparently, another bat will, out of courtesy, barf, bat barf into the other guy's mouth so that he has enough to eat. And you might say, well, that other bat should just be paying more attention. He should not listen to that rock and roll music. He should be echolocating and finding his own mosquitoes. But apparently bats do this, and I mention it because they're mammals that have this altruistic thing built in. So it's very reasonable to me, well, in fact, I insist it's a fact, I guess, now that I think about it. It is a fact that we look out for each other, and it is certainly that our ancestors who do not have that altruistic tendency imbued in them were not popular and didn't reproduce as well. And so that altruism is deep within us. And then the question is, I mean, I don't know if you're going there, but the question is, do you need religion to have altruism? Which came first? This is, or is it just of a piece?
I wasn't necessarily going there, but now that you bring it up, as you, I'm sure know, since, as you've stated, you know everything,
well, I mean,
E.O. Wilson.
Love him.
E.O. Wilson has said that
tell everybody who E.O. Wilson is.
E.O. Wilson studied ants. He studied a lot of ants, and one of the key things that E.O. Wilson brought to this was this question of society and competition, and particularly in ants, because there are ants that have very little to do with the breeding process, right? There's a queen, and there's all of this action, and everybody else just works. They don't do anything. They don't have any breeding involved. So how do their genes for being a worker and serving get passed on when they don't breed? They don't create anybody. E.O. Wilson studied this a lot. He told me, you may or may not know this, he told me years ago the reason he became good at ants is because he had bad eyesight. He could not see well, and that's something he could get close to and look at and study when he was very young. So it's true. He says this. But his point is to say, but one of his points, and this is where I am going, is to say that religion is also part of evolution because it's partially about that altruistic idea of community maybe being more important than individuals. What do you say?
Oh, I'm all for it. So the reason the doctors just help any patient, whether or not he or she's got an insurance card, the reason you let people go first through the door, or you help them up, or if they ask you directions, you don't just lie to them, is because we have this, I claim, we have this human tendency to help each other out. And I think it's deep within us. And I don't know that bats, I mean, I think if you look at the bones of a bat, that's one of my favorite things. They're just like us, only to stretch. I just think we have more in common than we realize.
You point out time and again in this book that we have more in common with everything than we realize. And one of the things I really I just found sort of charming about it and interesting was that you kept saying, this is what's special about humans. Not that we're special and apart from everything, but that we're special and intrinsically part of everything.
That's right, yeah.
We're closely related to the gorilla that you saw
Absolutely.
when you were younger.
Well, it wasn't that long ago. Ivan.
Ivan.
Did you ever go see Ivan?
I never saw Ivan.
So everybody, Ivan, okay, hold up. Let's not get too far afield. But yeah, it is remarkable that we share so much with every other living thing. Every other living thing that we've discovered has DNA or RNA. And so we're all in this together. And that to me is empowering. I mean, it's also troubling, or it makes you realize that you're responsible. That the way you treat other people, the way you treat other organisms, the way you live is part of this larger whole. And I find that it fills me with reverence. But I met Ivan the gorilla, who lived in a concrete box in Tacoma, Washington. He was brought to the U.S. as a baby back when people did such things. It was, a hobby. He was a pet. But then he became the 400-pound gorilla in the room. And they couldn't have him in the house and have dinner with him anymore and stuff. And he lived in this box, and he was miserable. You could see he was just bored. And my claim is, even though he's not a human, you could tell what he was feeling by just looking at him, by his gait, by the way he walked or moved or his posture. But then he got moved to the Atlanta Zoo, and he had it going on. I mean, he had, hectares of room, and he had girl gorillas that were clearly digging him. And he was just walking around, I'm Ivan, man, check me out. I can deal with the humans. And then I paraphrase. Then I met Vip, and Vip lives at the Seattle Zoo called the Woodland Park Zoo, and we did a show on mammals, and I met Vip, or he's behind glass. And Vip and these guys have room, man. I mean, they could be wandering around their enclosing, whatever one does out there, but he sits there right by the glass, and he just stares at you. Like, what's the deal, man? He can tell. Like, what happened? Why am I in here? Why are my people behind the glass? And you look at you skinny, hairless geek. What's the deal? And so I was on a talk show in Seattle this summer where there's a woman who's in an actress in the Planet of the Apes movies. And she has a relationship with an orangutan at the Woodland Park Zoo. And apparently they hang out and they paint together. And I said to her, is Vip still there? She goes, oh yeah, but he's mean. He's mean, just like even she had the same take on this guy.
Really?
So we have a lot in common, that's all. And the old thing, with gorilla, and the old thing I wonder, of course, is on the tree of life, was my old boss in there? I mean, is he part of us?
Do you think when we talk about species and evolution and this responsibility you talk about, stay with me here, are we wrong to save species in trouble?
I don't think so, because what makes an ecosystem resilient, and I mean in the big picture, name an ecosystem, a forest.
How about we name the bamboo forest and we talk about pandas? Everybody loves pandas. They're beautiful animals. Evolutionarily, kind of not great animals. I mean, they have to eat tons and tons and tons of stuff that doesn't give them much nutrients. They don't breed very well. You could argue that they were kind of on their way out anyway. I hate to say it, but
Boy, I don't.
Oh, don't be mad at me over pandas. I just, this is the way it is.
Well, here's the thing: the more diversity there is in an ecosystem, the more it can respond to changes. The more everything you got, the more insects, the more plants, the more things eating insects that eat plants.
Tell them about the grasses. The diversity story about the grass field, the one type of grass.
Oh, this is
actually terrific.
Oh, you can run
diversity.
this test, yeah. So people farmers plant monocultures, right? All one thing cultures of plants. And so with grasses, this test has been done, I guess, several times. Researchers, planted one type of grass in a plot. And my understanding, the plot's about as big as an audience sector in here. And then they planted or let occur the natural diversity of grasses. These are prairie grasses, let's say in the Midwest of the United States. And indeed, at first, the monoculture thrives. It goes crazy. But then over the course of 10 years or so, the diverse one is doing much better. The plants are all doing much better. And people speculate as to why this is. The specific type of nutrient that the specific type of grass is soaking it up out of the soil. But much more, probably a stronger effect, is when everybody pollinates. When all these guys pollinate at once, the pollinators get overwhelmed. When these guys pollinate in different times over the course of weeks in the spring, they just come out ahead. So it's a classic case where diversity in an ecosystem leads to a more robust, healthier, clearly more green stuff growing ecosystem than the monoculture. It's a classic. It's fascinating.
And do you think that applies to many, many other species?
I'm sure of it. The biodiversity is key to the health of an ecosystem. It allows it allows all the organisms there to respond to changes. Certain populations will go up, others will go down with changes, then the ones that are up will go down. But if you have too few different kinds, they'll all get overwhelmed. And by the way, if you like to worry about things, this is a great one. By reasonable reckoning, there have been 5 mass extinction events in the history of the Earth. And now there's a 6th, and you and I are causing it. So we're losing a species every hour. A species every hour. It's really, if you like to worry about things, it's a good one.
Tell me what kind of scale you're talking about on this, because we've had all sorts of reports about the rate of this thing happening. And of course, with respect, there are people who do not believe it. But what rate are you talking about?
10 species a day kind of thing, 20 species a day. And you think about species, you know, in the book and for that debate in Kentucky, I use 16 million species, which is one I could easily document, but it's probably 80 million. When you start counting viruses and bacteria nobody's found, and then of course everybody's favorite, the beetles. I don't know if you know this story. This guy, JBS Haldane, said, I don't know if there's a God, but whoever he is, he must be extraordinarily fond of beetles. Because he had found 350,000 just like on his without even trying, and so that's just beetles, let alone dragonflies and whoever else is running around, flying around. So humans are causing the loss or the completely wiping out of a species, several species a day. So ecosystems around the world are getting almost certainly getting less able to respond to change.
That's such a holiday feeling. That's
wonderful.
It's
great. Yeah.
Lifts me right up.
Yeah.
What is not answered?
But the more we understand, the more of us can address it.
What is not answered for you? What would you like to know about evolution? What is the thing that you're saying, gosh, I really wish I knew this? Here's some examples that I wonder about. Why don't we have any like 6-legged cheetahs? Because it seems like that would be something that would happen, because if you're fast with 4 legs, wouldn't there be one? Or why are there no really 3-legged mammals? Because a stool is very stable.
Yeah. This is a great question.
Are these fair questions?
Absolutely. And that has to do apparently with symmetry. In other words, symmetry was favored. It was in copying, in DNA. The guy who's really articulate about this is that guy who's really articulate about it.
Yeah.
So Richard Dawkins. Sorry, I saw him the other day. I started on a tangent. Oh, sorry. Imagine me. Yeah. Anyway, apparently symmetry was a shortcut. And so organisms ended up with bilateral symmetry. And then, we've evolved a little past it, where your heart isn't quite in the center, it's not quite symmetrical and stuff like that. But it's the question is why we have 4 and not 6 is a great one. I mean, or 8.
So what are the questions that you have when you look at evolution and you say, I firmly
Well, I
want
wanna
to
know-
But what explains this? What explains?
Here's what I want to know. How did it start? What started all this? Doggone it. And if we go to Mars with the right equipment and find what fossil bacterial mats, the equivalent of stromatolites on Mars, that would change the course of human history. But what if we go to some like super slushy outcropping in a south-facing canyon wall where the glacier is just oozing on the summer day on Mars, and there's still some Martian microbes eking out a living. Do they have DNA? Do, 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 do. So, it's not crazy. I mean, it's extraordinary, but not crazy to suggest that life started on Mars when Mars was wet, was hit with this impactor about 3 billion years ago, and through a process that people call Hohmann orbits, Hohman orbits, you can get from Mars to the Earth. You're falling into the sun. You can get from in about 17,000 years, which in geology, that ain't no nothing. And so I've been pulling a double negative for comedic effect. So a triple negative for comedic effect. So it could be, everybody, that we are all Martians, which would be just wild. If we go send a spacecraft out to Europa, which is this moon of Jupiter that has twice the seawater that the Earth does, what if there's something alive on Europa? And we could fly through these geysers, which apparently are shooting into space, as near as we can tell, and like count flies on the windshield. I mean, are there living things on Europa? Do they have grim jokes, the Europanians? I sure hope I don't swim near one of those guys. What? Gets shot out into space. I mean, it would be an extraordinary thing to find out. And by the way, we could do it for about $2 billion over the course of 10 or 12 years. We were all excited about Philly and Rosetta and that comet.
Yeah,
right?
the comet landing, that was
would
cool.
be really
and yet
something.
you hated the movie Interstellar.
Oh, God. Hate a lot. Bill, that's a lot. But, if I'm going to spend 3 years with a character that looks like Anne Hathaway, come on. and then, it's not my thing, but ladies, Matthew McConaughey, they say, very good-looking young man. I wanted to, is it me? Okay, then the heroine of the movie, who is a physicist,
Yeah.
the character,
Right.
she does her thing while you're not looking. They're all out on some other thing having a fist fight in spacesuits, and she gets old and changes the course of human history and everything.
Yeah.
So from storytelling, I was troubled. But one thing I got out of it that's good for everybody to remember is if there is a wormhole, which may or may not actually be an actual thing, you can come at it from any direction. That's good to know. It's spherical. Keep that in mind. If it comes up.
Would you like to go to space?
Oh, man. I applied 4 times. No, I tell a story all the time. So it's like they show up, it's as though they show up with a clipboard. How many PhDs do you have? A, 100 to 300. The kind of people that become astronauts are just extraordinary, So after Krista McCullough got killed,
Yeah.
I don't think they were going to let anybody like me fly. So you guys, last Thursday, Orion, went farther and deeper into space than we've gone since the Apollo era. So it's just the start of things. I mean, you guys, it is very reasonable that humankind could do a mission to Mars. Are we talking about to do a mission to Mars to just go around the planet and have a look-see and come back, and that would be affordable. And we would have no problem of contaminating the Martian surface. We could stop at one of the moons, Phobos of Mars, and we could do this within the budget. We'll just keep things going, and it would be like Apollo 8. And how many people in here, Apollo 8, if you remember, went up around the moon back. How many people know the acronym STEM? STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. My claim is that if we had a robuster space program, robuster being a kind of Nibonic expression, meaning a little more robust, we wouldn't have to have this STEM. It would just happen. Everybody would just be into it. That's my claim. That's hard to prove, but easy to hint at.
And the cornerstone of all of that, as you point out time and again, and here is an embracing of evolution at a societal level. We have questions from you all here, which we're going to get to in a moment. We'll start going through them when they bring them out here, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. I love the idea that you would like to go to space, because you said we're talking about evolution here. Well, that, as you point out, is part of the process, right?
That's right. One of the extraordinary things that I hope everybody just takes a second or a month. We are made of the dust of exploded stars. And so where I went to school, this stuff happens. There's a guy named Hans Bethe, who, how many people, Nobel Prize? How many people? Yeah, exactly. He had a Nobel Prize because he discovered what is called the CNO cycle, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen cycle in stars. And at this level, the word oxygen is sort of an idea. It means 8 protons, really. The electrons are all zipped off. He discovered the process by which stars create all these elements that you and I are made of. So we are at least one of the ways that the universe knows itself. And that just fills me with reverence. Every day I just go, wow, don't blow it, man. You know? Yeah.
Let's look at some questions that we have here.
This is great, thank you.
In your opinion, what is the greatest threat to scientific advancement, and how can we incentivize more investment in STEM education, specifically for young girls?
So, by the way, full disclosure, Tom's daughter, Ronnie, is going to graduate any minute in aerospace from Georgia. She'll be a ramblin' wreck from Georgia Tech and a heck of an engineer. And she's going to get her PhD in aerospace, right?
That's the plan at the moment.
And I'll just tell you an interesting thing about aerospace.
He's a big fan. I heard a lot about this before I came here. Ask him this, tell him this.
That's really nice. Anyway, half the humans are women. Science is the best idea humans have ever had, my claim. So half the scientists should be women. All right, and we have a problem also. When I was a kid, the world had changed to 3 billion people. Now there's 7.2 billion. The fastest way to bring that down to a manageable number is to educate girls, to raise the standard of living of girls. So I am delighted that people like your daughter are pursuing careers in science.
How do you get more?
Exactly. Apparently, one way is, of course, not everyone all at once, algebra. So apparently algebra is the single most reliable indicator of whether or not you pursue a career in math and science. It's not clear that it's the cause, but apparently people who are comfortable thinking about numbers in abstract terms are comfortable thinking about all sorts of things in abstract terms. So and I'm not the first guy to come up with this, that we would start teaching algebra a little sooner in school, in elementary school, and just have it lower pressure. So by the time you get to 7th grade, whoa, it doesn't hit you all at once. And so this would be a very inexpensive and reasonable way, it is believed by professional educators, to embrace girls and women. And today is Pearl Harbor Day, and I just got to throw this in. My mom was recruited by the Navy to work on the Enigma code. And I was here, was it 2 weeks ago, to watch the movie, The Imitation Game. And my whole life, people would ask her, what did you do during the war, Jackie? Oh, I can't talk about it. Can't talk about it. So the family myth, Tom, is that she was good at math and science. That's the family myth. Huh?
You've another question here. You've taken a bit of heat from the scientific community about GMOs. Short answer, it says. Do you think GMOs are bad, and why?
No, it depends. It depends. I just want to be comfortable about the ecosystem. So everybody agrees if you do intra-species breeding, which is what George Washington did with a magnifying glass and tweezers to get better wheat. Nobody's got any problem with that. Everybody, you may recall, they took took gene from an Arctic fish and put it into tomatoes. And the tomatoes weren't that great. Apparently, they were not that tasty. But also, people are a little weirded out about it. And McDonald's, what is it about McDonald's? French fries. They asked consumers, do you want genetically modified potatoes? They said no, and maybe out of ignorance. But here's a question for everybody. What if you take a gene from the thing that's already its own DNA and turn it on or modify it and stick it back in its own DNA? And that one is a classic, not sure. But I would say if you got to pick, you want to err on the safe side. And there was, because we don't know the ecosystem. But it's not an inherently bad idea. I'll give you that. Just careful of the ecosystem.
You mentioned a moment ago the idea about promoting algebra earlier. Here's a related question. How do you recommend, because you're really good at this, how do you recommend teachers engage students in authentic activities that promote scientific literacy? And how do you engage the families in supporting that?
Engaging the families is tough. The key to, what is it about your favorite teacher that you liked? Is his or her passion, right? If you're a teacher, if you're an educator out here, just let it out, man. Let your kids, your students know how much you love solutions problems with 4% of sulfuric acid mixed with 8% to produce a 6. Let them know that you think it's cool. And if you don't think it's cool, pretend. Because that's what engages kids, is when you, or anybody, is when you tell stories and you let your passion through. So I remind if I meet a lot of rocket scientists in my job these days. I meet the occasional Nobel laureate. You do not want these people teaching kindergarten. They would suck at it. I'm sorry. It's a different skill. And if I were king of the forest, we would pay teachers so that they can make a living, and we attract the best people to it, and we invest in schools and blah, blah, blah. I know you've all heard it, but it's the key to our future. I mean, it really is. Yes, sir.
In what ways do you continue to learn on a daily basis? And what is your learning process?
Try writing a freaking book, all right? You got to look stuff up. You look stuff up you haven't looked up in years and years, and you contact, I have colleagues out there. Don Prothrow is just celebrated geologist, quite the evolutionary guy. Jeannie Scott helped me out. I don't know if you know her. She's very well known. She just retired from National Center for Science. They go around fighting lawsuits about evolution, and these people will help you out. But the other thing I'll say, there's discussion nowadays about meditation and this great value of meditation, of concentrating on the candle flame to ignoring everything else. I will say that is not how I roll. I mean, I'll just tell you, I read something about speciation or punctuated equilibrium, and I'm turning it over in the back of my mind while I'm riding my bike for days and weeks. I'm turning over these concepts that I guess I was exposed to in school. I've read books about the selfish gene or the red queen, this theory about germs and parasites. And that stuff is steeping in tea brewing terminology. So I guess what it is I get it in there and let it turn over. The trouble for students in school, as you may recall, and you're probably some of you in school, you don't have time. Like, let's go. And so it's a skill you got to develop, I think, to be thinking about more than one thing at a time.
What would you have done if you didn't do this for a living?
Oh, I guess I would have stayed on a drawing board. Say it would have been an engineer, and then I would have learned.
Yeah, but let's say you weren't in science engineering at all. What would you have done?
Well, I guess you can see why I didn't pursue a career in stand-up comedy. But I did dabble in that for several years.
Yeah.
I middled. That's how far
Yeah.
I got. If you know, do you know this expression? Do you know? So there's the headliner, the MC is usually called in the middle act. I middled,
Yeah.
but I never made it to MC.
A lot of
To,
experience with
headline.
extinction, eh?
Yes, yes, and random reward. Like some nights I was funny. I mean, I was really funny. Anyone? As well as anyone? Funny looking, huh? And then other nights I just was awful. Well, Bill, that's no surprise. And so I just, to get that consistency where you can nail it, it's really hard.
Question here. I know several medical doctors who do not accept the evidence supporting evolution. Does that surprise you? And do you know any engineers that feel in a similar way?
Oh, yeah. One of the things I will say is a demonstrable difference between a scientist and an engineer writ large in the big approximation. You'll meet a lot of engineers that I have met over the years, a lot of engineers who are very conservative in their thinking to the point where they don't really accept evolution, and they'll even use the phrase just a theory. So just to fill you in, a hypothesis is one thing. A theory is a scientific idea that allows you to make predictions, and so that's the essence of it. And that I find very troubling because engineers, like for example, I just took a lot of physics. I mean, I took physics as a mechanical engineer. And to meet people that sort of don't know how it all got here is, I always find really troubling. And so we're working to change the world. I'm very proud of being an engineer. I like to say we use science to solve problems and make things. And every single thing in this room, everything here at some point came out of somebody's head. And a lot of those heads were engineers, especially the electricity. Yeah.
You mentioned you studied a lot of physics. Who's your favorite Big Bang Theory character?
Well, I think my favorite character really is Professor Proton.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, played by Bob Newhart, but he's only occasional. But you know, I mean, Sheldon is just hilarious. I mean, come on. But just as a guy, kind of like the Penny. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like Penny.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be her. You know, that would be a big change for me, man. That would. It's not my deal.
Why did you decide, speaking of TV, why did you decide to do a TV show instead of just continuing to do science, as so many people do?
Oh, well, keep in mind the expression do science. I was doing engineering. So I worked on a drawing board. At this point in our story, I was working at Sunstrand Data Control, which has now been absorbed by Honeywell, making a navigation system for business jets. This is when global positioning was military only. It was within 30 meters, which wouldn't even tell you what side of the street you were on. How could you fly across the Pacific Ocean and be off 30 meters? It would be ridiculous. Anyway, these people I was working for were obsessed with making a profit every 3 months, every quarter. And I'm right there, if you are in the business of manufacturing light bulbs or lamps or screws or chairs, you can do that. In fact, you have to do that. You constantly monitor the process, try to improve the process, try to get a product that consumers like better, new ideas. Okay. But when you're starting from scratch to make a business jet navigation system that's going to be a third the size of the one that's been on the market for 12, 15 years already, with a bunch of young guys who are just kind of feeling their way. You can't do it in 3 months. And this was contemporary with the Ford Pinto. It's contemporary with leisure suits. And I just went, man, this sucks. This is really depressing. And so I was a young guy. I was a big United Way big brother. And I also volunteered at the Pacific Science Center. And I was just in Toronto on Thursday, and I yet again, ate marshmallows dipped in liquid nitrogen, so that steam comes out of your nose, And so I still love that. And so I wanted to affect kids. And if you it's documented, people, on the sheet I produced for everybody who came to work on the show. And over the years, there were over 100 people. There were all these interns at a PBS station. The objective, just like the book, it says right there, 1993, change the world. And so I wanted to get enough young people excited about science. The United States would want, because I was born in the US, I'm a patriot, whatever. No, I mean, I'm not objective. That's what I'm saying. I'm not of Canadian ancestry. I'm not of European, I mean, of European ancestry, but I was born in the US when the US was going to the moon and doing all these extraordinary things, won the war. I wanted the US to once again be the world leader in transportation and environmental stewardship and so on. And I really felt strongly that it would take decades. So that's what I really was a conscious decision, you guys. So here we are. We'll see.
How many bow ties do you have?
About 400.
Really?
This one I'm wearing, I've had all afternoon. I happened to be in Barnes & Noble just to see if a certain book was featured, and then that's around the corner from Brooks Brothers, and I just kind of moseyed in there, and the guy said, this young guy, Roscoe is his name, he said, this is the last one, Bill. This is the last one we have. It's been very popular. So that's salesmanship. And so I went with the red and green, right?
Yeah.
But the same tie, I could have gone, aren't these snowflakes? Or is that snowflakes?
Oh, those are snowflakes
Snowflakes.
inside. Oh.
Yeah, I could have gone, yeah. You could turn it over. And so this is a fad right now, and I really like it.
Ooh, look at this.
People call it reversible, but if you put it together this way, then you can bring the snowflakes to the front. And then the red plaid is back there. And I know it. Yeah. I know it's back there. So we have snowflakes.
This is fantastic.
So, by the way, I took it apart and buttoned it back together on the subway, on the 5 train. Yeah. And I took some selfies. Yeah.
That is fantastic. I've never seen anybody tie a bow tie so effortlessly in a mirror.
It's not my first time, Tom. No, but it's so. By the way,
evolution.
By the way, you'll note that the knot on your shoe is the same as the knot around your neck. I mean, if you tie a bow tie. But you meet a lot of people, and I mean, this is science education. It's troubling. It's troubling. Who tie like that. I don't know if you can see it, but this one's going this way, like that, and this one's going this way. I can tell you right now, peoples, this is a hypothesis, and you can test it yourself. This one will come untied. This one will not. It's not magic, it's yes! Yes! Yes!
The book is called Undeniable Evolution and the Science of Creation by Bill Nye. He will be signing it afterward next door, whatever next door is here. I hope you will read it because it really is a fascinating and wonderful read.
God, thank you.
Whether you're a science type or not, it'll make you one, and heaven knows we need a lot of those around here.
You did a great job, Tom. A hand for our moderator.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you so much. Thank you.